Hello and welcome back to the DIY SSG96 project. In previous episodes we've had a look at the base rifle that I'm using for the project, the Cyma CM706. We've looked at doing free mods, and then we've looked at replacing the barrel and hop-up assembly. And this week we are not looking at upgrades and instead looking at this. So yes, I have in the building an SSG96, and no, I didn't actually buy one myself. This has actually been sent to me by one of you guys. So big shout out to Dom who sent me this. I'll put his Instagram handle here, check him out. He reached out of the blue and said, hey, I've got an SSG96, I'm happy to lend it to you so you've got a comparison. And of course I said, well, that's amazing, cheers dude. And so here it is. Now I don't have it for long, in fact it's going back to him tomorrow, straight after I do a range test with it. So we will see how this actually performs. Now obviously the caveat to this being from one of you guys is this isn't brand new, this is not as it comes out of the box, this has been skirmished a couple of times. And in fact, actually Don was telling me the hop chamber in this was faulty from factory. He reached out to the Novritsch support team and they sorted him out and sent him a new hop chamber, and now it works. So big plus to the Novritsch team there, that aftermarket care is there, which is good to see. I don't think I would get the same level of support from the guys I bought the CM706 off of. I have heard horror stories from them. Well, actually I did have a problem. So in my opinion, that's actually a big tick for the Novritsch team. They have some great aftermarket support. Not only are the parts in warranty for 25 years and they will replace them, there have also been stories of them not being able to ship to the UK at the moment due to... However, they have contracted UK techs to repair rifles. So in the case I know of is the SSR-15 had issues and they couldn't send a spare out, so they paid for Native Airsoft to fix the gun for them, which is actually really good to see. I don't think many companies would do that. Now before we go any further, I just want to say if you enjoy the content and you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. It really does help out the channel. Right, enough of my shilling, so let's get back on into this. As you can see, very nice packaged black box with obviously the Novritsch logo on it, but doesn't give away that, you know, there is a rifle in here, which is nice. Does that say 706 on it? It does say 706. Is that rifle number 706, or is that saying that it's based off a Cyma CM706? Coincidence?
I think not!
I think do. I realise you can't see me. Right, so caveat, because this has obviously been unpacked and used before, I'm not 100% sure this is how it came originally, but this is what I've been sent. On top, we have Novritsch's lovely little instruction manual here, and his signature. Good, I can use that on checks. And obviously links to all of his academy stuff, which you unlock by buying a product. General warnings, and then lovely little safety guide here. Of course, Novritsch modelling all of the do's and don'ts of airsoft rifles. Very nice to see. Actually, that's pretty good because he is targeting kind of first-time buyers with his products, and it is good to give them some basic instructions on what they're doing. This is the shipping information, Dom shipping stuff. I'm not going to show you that. Right, so I'm going to put the paperwork to one side and we're going to see what is under the packing foam. We have the rifle disassembled into the stock and barrel assembly, and I'm assuming that this cutout here is for BBs if you buy them. So let's grab it out. Here is the stock and the mag sitting in the mag well. Obviously slightly different from my stock in that it is a black polymer as opposed to the kind of OD green. And also it is the fixed stock variant, so it doesn't hinge behind the pistol grip. We have our clear mag, and I do have some BBs in here. These are .48 for testing. Very similar design, although I dare say slightly different to the Cyma mags, but similar enough. It's quite nice that you can see how many BBs you have in it, and also actually you can see the shape of the BB feed, which I thought went around like that, but obviously not. And now we come on to the main receiver. So we have the very Novritsch style fluted barrel, branded receiver here. Oh, those are some very, very sharp mills. There's no radiusing on that. Oh, very sharp. And the cut down slot here is also quite sharp on the to touch. And finally, in here we have a bag of bits, the Allen key for assembly, plus we have these two parts which form the front attachment pin for the barrel, but also double as the Harris bipod attachment point. So this is a slightly different attachment method to the Cyma, which just uses the screw slightly further back. So that's it for the box. So I'm just going to pack this up, move it out the way. We'll switch the lenses over so I can do a bit more zooming in on parts, and then we will tear down the Novritsch rifle and see what the internals are like. So let's start by having a look at the cylinder. So I have two other cylinders to compare it to. The one that's come out of the DIY SSG project, and also I have an Airsoft Pro one, complete with Airsoft Pro internals, which may end up in the DIY project at some point. So having a look at the externals, the first thing I noticed is the Cyma is visibly larger in diameter than the other two. Now this is consistent with what we've seen so far with regard to the Cyma, and it being slightly bigger than the APS2 spec. Now Novritsch seems to have matched the APS2 spec and is very similar in size to the Airsoft Pro cylinder. One thing I instantly noticed about the Novritsch bolt is it has the out of battery bolt handle lock on it, which means if the bolt is not all the way forward, the bolt handle will stay locked in the unlocked position. Locked in the unlocked position. Yep, that's what I said. This feature is not found on the Cyma, but is found on the Well, which handle is currently on my Airsoft Pro piston. It's a really nice feature to have, and it does stop you pushing your bolt handle down before you're all the way forwards. So as you can see, it won't move until that pin is pushed in, and then it drops down, and it will pop back up quite happily. So both the Novritsch rifle and the Airsoft Pro parts have metal spring guides and pistons, although they are not the same. Unlike the Cyma, which comes stock with the polymer parts. Now so far I haven't had any issues with that, and I haven't seen any wear on it. However, plastic will break eventually, as will metal, but metal will take a much longer time to do it. The Cyma is crimped in place, whereas both the Novritsch rifle and the Airsoft Pro cylinder are pinned in place. You see the pin there, and it's off center there, which allows us to use the cocked indicator. Note, the Airsoft Pro cylinder has a much bigger pin that runs through the middle and therefore does not have a cocked indicator on it, which is a loss in some respects but is probably a stronger design. Looking at the bolt handles themselves, both the Cyma and the Well handle are quite smooth to the touch and quite well finished. The Novritsch one is quite different and is very textured. It's almost like it's quite roughly cast, which is interesting. It does give more texture, but I feel like it looks less finished compared to the other bolt handles. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not me saying it's a badly made part, it just to me looks like a slightly less finished part. Looking at the rear of the bolts, we can see that the Novritsch and the Well are very similar, with the Novritsch just being a slightly darker paint on it, and the Cyma being much more black, but no, it lacks the red indication for the fire position. Also note that the Cyma is slightly thicker on account of the slightly bigger cylinder. Right, so let's move our way forward and look at the nozzle slash cylinder head. As we can see, the bottom one here is the Cyma and uses a brass finished nozzle. Note it's got basically no chamfer in the front, but does have threading in it, which I believe allows them to quickly reduce the velocity by putting a blocker into the nozzle. The Novritsch and Airsoft Pro cylinder heads seem to be fairly similar. Note that the Airsoft Pro has a set of cuts which you can get some form of tool round to help in the unscrewing process. These do not appear on the Novritsch cylinder head. They both have tapered nozzle ends to help with guiding into the chamber, and from the looks of it, the Novritsch inner diameter seems to be smaller than the Airsoft Pro. Also, doing a very rough test, I can see that the Airsoft Pro nozzle is slightly longer by about 1 mil than the Novritsch nozzle. Right, so it's all well and good looking at the externals, but let's pop open the cylinder head and have a look at the internals. We've got a nice big O-ring to help with seal. This is, I think, a much fatter O-ring than the Cyma, and also a very big cushioning pad to help take the impact of the cylinder head and hopefully make it a bit quieter. Yep, we can see that that O-ring's definitely thicker, and also there seems to be no padding on that Cyma cylinder head. So here we have the Novritsch cylinder head, and here we have the Airsoft Pro cylinder head. So for reference, neither of them are made from steel, so I'm assuming these are probably aluminium. But I can see turned down machine marks on both of these, so these have been CNC produced, which is quite nice to see, or at least CNC finished. They both have fairly chunky sized O-rings on them, and both have cushioning pads on the back of them, though the Novritsch one is certainly bigger. Right, let's have a look at the pistons. So two very different approaches here. This one's obviously going for the mushroom piston head, obviously all in the Cyma polymer, whereas the Novritsch uses the cup style braking and good seal with a couple of glide rings and obviously a metal construction. So you've got the Airsoft Pro on the left here, where it says Airsoft Pro, and then the Novritsch is in this nice blue. They're both 90-degree shelves for trigger release. Now, what are these made of? I'm assuming these are both again going to be lightweight metal, so probably an aluminium. And again, we can see the different types of design they've gone for. This is a port and piston head pushing out an O-ring to give us air seal. This is a cup style, which again, the air goes into the slots and pushes out the cup. So they're both decent pistons, they're just designed slightly differently. So yes, the Novritsch spring is definitely bigger, also shorter, but that makes sense. It's a thicker coil, it's going to store more energy in it. It's also very stiff compared to this one. Yeah, that's got more flex in it compared to that. So that's probably a stronger spring. Interesting to note, it has this like rubber material around the spring guide, which I'm assuming stops spring wobble and helps quieten down the vibrations of the shot. So yeah, just quickly to interject there, with knowledge I didn't know at the time of filming, the next day when I met up with Dom to give him his rifle back, he actually mentioned to me that that was a mod he did and wasn't a stock mod from Novritsch. He said the stock rifle was very twangy and he didn't like it, so he came up with that idea of putting the heat shrink on the spring guide, and it really dampened down the noise and made it a much cleaner sounding gun. So if you have a rifle that sounds like a bit of a dueling banjo, it's very straightforward. It's a large bit of heat shrink, put it on your spring guide, heat it up, shrink it down, and then hopefully that should dampen down all of your twanginess of your springs. And while we're talking about spring guides, here is the Cyma one, just a polymer part. The Novritsch one is a one-piece solid bit of metal by the looks of it, although there are no forms of bearings on it, so that's going to scratch up in the end. But then again, it's held in place firmly. I don't think that's going to break anytime soon. That being said, ooh, interesting. It does seem to have some kind of surface finish which is starting to peel up at the back. I'm not going to pull it off any further than that because this is not my rifle. But looking underneath, it does also appear to still be metal, just a different type. Oh, it is magnetic. So just a weird coating on it, maybe just want it shiniest. Now I've set the Airsoft Pro one up for this spring here, which is quite a narrow spring. I believe this is the stock spring the well came with. But it is important to note that it does come with an adapter for bigger springs, so that should happily now take the Novritsch spring diameter. Now the Airsoft Pro obviously doesn't have the hole for the cock indicator, but it does have some nice bearings on it, so the spring is able to freely turn on it, which is nice. Right, I don't know all that much about the cocked indicator, so I don't want to try and force it out, but again, it is just a rod that rides on the inside of the spring guide. So that's the cylinder, and I've already tested this, and this rifle does get a good air seal, so no quabbles there. Overall, it seems to be a nice construction, and it gives good air seal and is not too loud, so I don't see any major issues with this rifle other than that weird coating stripping on the spring guide. Before we move on, I thought I'd just check what material is the cylinder actually made from. So first up, we have the Cyma one, not steel. Now the Novritsch rifle, okay, there it's getting attracted. I'm assuming that's attracting to the spring, but up here we're not seeing any form of attraction, so again I'm going to assume that's aluminium. And then finally the Airsoft Pro, that is steel. They're all usable, but the Novritsch is definitely better than the Cyma. The Airsoft Pro parts are better than the Novritsch parts, in my opinion. The barrel and receiver assembly. Obviously there are some key differences. The Novritsch rifle one has a shorter outer barrel. It's about 3 inches off the end there. And then we have slightly different mounting options. So here we can see the screw where the front screw goes in, and here we can see the key slot for where the Harris bipod mounting attachment connector goes. Mag catch looks fairly similar. Obviously the Novritsch rifle mag will go into the Novritsch rifle and lock. Will it go into the Cyma? Yes. Will it lock? No. So not compatible. Do I have a Cyma mag to hand? Cyma mag will go in and lock. Will it go into the Novritsch rifle? Yes, it will. Okay. So you can use Cyma mags in Novritsch rifles, which is good because you can pick these up for like 6 quid. And I think these are a bit more like 10 quid. Plus these are in the UK. I don't know if there are any of these in the UK. Useful knowledge there. Moving further back, we can see that the Novritsch receiver has a nice little serial number on it. Camera shot. But also is a much more solid receiver than the Cyma one. Cyma one's obviously milled out quite a lot. The Novritsch one is not. Also, it's got these nice little lightning cuts on either side. This one obviously has the SSG96 cal 6mm etched in it. Novritsch rifle, and I'm assuming this is a serial number, T452M, don't know. So comparing the two receivers, you can see there is much less space around the barrel on the Cyma as opposed to the Novritsch, and that's because the Cyma uses a bigger diameter barrel and a bigger diameter hop chamber. That may be due to the fact that the Novritsch rifle is based on the R96, which is a 7.62 sniper rifle, whereas the Cyma 706 might actually be based off like the R115, which is the current rifle, which uses 338 Lapua, which is a bigger round, therefore probably needs a bigger barrel. Or it could just be the Cyma got their measurements off. Well, either way, the Novritsch rifle has a smaller outer diameter barrel compared to the Cyma. Okay, I take back what I said. Actually, despite this looking chunkier, it is lighter than the Cyma version. How are they size-wise? Less than 5mm in that. Also, we can see the Novritsch receiver is taller by another couple of mil. The extractor window is much bigger on the Novritsch rifle, and the trigger boxes are slightly different. Novritsch is a much squarer design as opposed to the kind of stepped one on the Cyma. So here we have the Novritsch glide ring, and here we have the Cyma glide ring. See, the Cyma one is much bigger, but that's because we have a bigger diameter cylinder and a bigger diameter barrel bore. One other thing to note is the Novritsch receiver is a single piece other than the trigger box, whereas the Cyma has a separate screwed on rail on top. Right, so let's get the Novritsch trigger box apart and have a look inside it. So taking off the trigger box reveals these two screws here and these two threaded inserts, which is quite nice to see. If you're taking your trigger box off quite a lot and this is a weakish material, that can wear it down, but those inserts help. But these two screws here are for this cover plate. Now this is for the left-right hand conversion of the Novritsch rifle. Now I don't really care about that conversion because I want my rifle to look like a British service rifle. However, if you are looking to get into the sniper game and you are left-hand dominant, technically you'll be left-eye dominant, therefore you'll want your left hand cocking. This is a really nice feature to have, so you can switch over and then you've got a left-hand bolt throw, so you're not having to do a weird cock, which is something Mark from Thin Brown Line actually likes doing. He's left-hand dominant but uses a right-hand cock bolt, says it's nice. He's weird though. So nice feature to see included on the base rifle. Obviously the Cyma does not have that feature. So as I thought, this trigger box does have the cutouts for the out of battery safety, but to speed up the disassembly and reassembly, the Novritsch team have opted to not have that feature installed. I've done the same thing on this rifle, and in fact actually looking at it, this receiver doesn't support that feature, so it doesn't have the cutout necessary for that feature. Feels like it's got a quite nice clean brake on it. It's We have a safety. Again, this seems to be made of very similar metal to my what is now X safety, so be careful with that. That could break. It seems to have a slightly weaker click compared to the Cyma. So we can see the casing is definitely cast and not from steel. We're being attracted to the internal parts. The trigger, not steel. There we go. The trigger sear is steel, and the piston sear is also steel. So those are nice strong parts. Okay, so that's interesting to see. We've got this spring here which acts as the kind of latch for the spring guide holder retainer. So as we can see, the Cyma trigger box is pretty much the same construction. It is cast material, spray painted black with steel core parts. Now, I have to admit, I think the Cyma is probably the better of the two gearboxes to work on. It seems to be a lot easier to a lot easier to put back together because of the way the springs are somewhat self-retained. So as I do the screws up on this trigger box, let's have a little chat between the two. So they're actually pretty much for muchness in terms of construction. They're both cast metal externals with steel trigger sears and piston sears, which is what you want. They both now have the outer battery safety removed, which means it's a lot easier to take the cylinder in and out. So if you need to change your spring for FPS limits, that is quite easy to do. Obviously the Novritsch rifle has the extra spring set up for latching the spring guide stopper, which the Cyma doesn't, but I haven't seen any real issue with that. It doesn't fall out the rifle. Obviously the trade-off though is the Novritsch trigger box is actually quite a lot bigger. So yes, overall I actually have to give it to the Cyma. Their construction methodologies are fairly similar, but it's a much more compact package, and also it's a lot easier to work on as the spring design setup for the piston sear is a lot nicer. But again, they're both pretty good trigger boxes. So let's reinstall them onto their respective receivers, and we'll move on to have a look at the hop and the barrel. As we discussed earlier, the Cyma barrel is slightly longer than the Novritsch barrel. What I do like about the Novritsch barrel straight away is that they've made a clearly milled cut for where the grub screw attaches to the threads. Here they've kind of drilled a hole, but it's really messing up the threads around there, which is not good to see. Oh, that's good to see. They've actually threaded the outer barrel. So the hole where the magwell attaches is actually threaded. It, I believe, is not on the Cyma. It's interesting, this barrel has no provision for a non top dead center hop. So this is not just the maple leaf one, I believe. I believe this is a custom barrel. Whether or not it's based off the maple leaf one, that's a different matter. So the barrel stabilization stuff seems to be fitted into the barrel, which is good to see. So it's very tight in there. But this top dead center hop is actually kind of a lie.
No, there's no way that's correct.
It's not a top dead center hop. What it is a top adjusting hop. So as you turn the hop on, what you're actually doing is loosening that grub screw. As you loosen it, it pushes against the inside of the barrel and pushes this arm down, which pushes this flat nub onto the hop up rubber there. Here is the Cyma stock one. As you can see, you adjust on the bottom, you adjust that screw, it moves this collar up and down, which moves the hop arm up and down. What they've basically done is got rid of this collar and put that adjustment screw in the hop arm, and you go from the top, which moves the arm up and down. But it is not a true top dead center hop, because a top dead center hop, when you adjust your screw, you're putting your pressure directly down onto the hop patch. So that's kind of a lie there, Novritsch. The barrel seems actually pretty nice. I mean, it is brass barrel, but it's fairly shiny through the lengths, and I can't see any major bits of dirt or issues on it. There is a very minimal, and I mean very minimal, amount of crowning on it, but nothing to write home about. I will take a B-roll photo of this, but there isn't any spacers in here until just at the front of this key is a spacer. Admittedly, that's probably been pulled down the inner barrel as I've taken the barrel out, so hopefully as I push the barrel back in it will move it forwards. But that means that the barrel is only held at the actual hop chamber, that spacer, and in this cap. Yeah, okay, so there's an O-ring in the barrel cap, which the barrel sits in. Okay, so yeah, we're stabilised in an O-ring there, and we're stabilised here. Now that O-ring stops air leaks, so if you actually cover the muzzle cap, it has 100% air seal, which is good to see actually, and I have done that test. Okay, this looks very similar to the welt. Oh snap, there we go. It is in fact the maple leaf. This is a 75 degree, oh this is the 70 degree bucking. I can't remember what Novritsch has in his, but they are pretty much the same, so yep, that's right, that's the maple leaf bucking. There's the locking ring and there's the nozzle guide. Right, so just quickly we'll have a look at the Cyma setup. So I have loosened off, and now we can take off the mag catch. Both the Novritsch and the Cyma are pretty similar, pretty much horses for courses. However, where they differ is how they attach. The Cyma one relies entirely on screwing into the hop chamber and doesn't have any threading here, and in fact has a slot, so that can kind of slide around a bit, which is not exactly the best. Now obviously I have done some upgrades to this one. So this has the Action Army chamber in it, paired with a ZCI 450 barrel, and I believe a Maple Leaf MR hot rubber in here. Obviously this has a nice big crown on it, and this uses standard AEG barrels, which are much more plentiful than Type 96 barrels. That gives you a much more wider range of choice for upgrades. Ratings on that, well, it looks well constructed, although they have kind of led you on a bit with the TDC hop, which is not entirely true because it's top, but it's not dead center. It's just kind of top. So, I mean, it's probably a step up from the standard design, and pairing that with the Maple Leaf hop rubber should give good results. So, better than the Cyma, yes. Is it better than the upgraded one that I have here? That is hard to tell. It may be because of the top, but if I was to top dead center this, and I am planning on top dead centering this properly, then maybe actually this setup will take a slight edge. So let's reinstall that and we'll go over the kind of overall build quality. Okay, so here is the stock. Interesting to note that some of the screws are Allen keys and some of them are screw retainers. I for one think that they should all be symmetrical on either side of the rifle, and in fact if we grab the Cyma, as we look down the length of this side, these are all screw mounts and these are all Allen key mounts. Now I understand why they've done these. These are done at particularly thin parts of the body, so it's easier to just put a short screw through, but Simon spent the time to make it look right on the externals. Now obviously one of the biggest key differences between the Novritsch rifle and the Cyma rifle is the Cyma has the folding stock, which the Novritsch doesn't. However, the good thing about the Novritsch having the fixed stock is you don't get the folding stock wobble that the Cyma currently has, though I have seen rumours on how to fix that and I will be researching that further. The Cyma comes with a rear monopod, Novritsch rifle doesn't. For Airsoft, honestly, are you going to be using a monopod at the back? Probably not. Novritsch has gone down a slightly different butt path to the Cyma, so it's this spaced slot style with a very texturized, stylized grip, and obviously he has the Novritsch branding on the back of it. The Cyma has just gone for a fixed rubber butt pad with A1 on it, which I think is meant to be ripping off the AI of Accuracy International, the builder of the real rifle. There are two things that really kind of annoy me about the Novritsch rifle. One is that the cheek riser, you need to have your Allen key, your assembly Allen key, to adjust it. But then again, I've kind of figured out that once you've got your cheek riser in the right position for your scope, you just kind of leave it there. So I kind of get that. However, it is a pain when you want to take your cylinder out. You need to get that Allen key and find that. On the Cymer, you can either just undo those two nuts and take it off, or quite easily fold the stock out the way to take your cylinder out. The other thing that annoys me about the Novritsch is the empty mag indicator. Here on the Cymer, we can see it's a nice, quite clear white little nub that sticks up, fairly visible. The Novritsch rifle is black on black, and people have said theirs has a red dot on it. This one certainly does not, so that's quite unobservable. Overall build quality wise, I think the Novritsch is fairly solid. In fact, the only bit of flex is up here, just in front of, well, actually up here around the mag well, there is a bit of flex and it can bend and push over one another, but I believe the Cymer has the same issues. So it's much of a muchness on the design. There's only such strength you can get out of a polymer. So the Cymer has a very ingrained texture to it. It's not too much, but it's good to grip and it feels nice under the touch. So the Novritsch rifle, on the other hand, still has a texture to it, but it's a much more subtle texture. I'm not saying that's bad, it's just something to note. I don't know what the real steel polymers are actually like. The join seams on the Novritsch rifle seem to be a lot rougher than they are on the Cymer, especially around the pistol grip. There seems to be almost a mil of step there. Now the pistol grip here seems a lot smoother on the Cymer. In fact, all of the joints seem a lot smoother. Most of them have been smoothed out and I can't really feel any major steps other than here, which is where I took a set of flathead screwdrivers to it to try and open it up to see what's going on with the folding stock. So actually, I think that goes to Cymer in terms of making the two halves meet. Now the interesting thing is, I swear I saw in a Novritsch podcast that they actually tried to effectively plastic weld the halves together.
Because it's bolted together while this one is glued together.
Yeah, right.
I'm actually surprised that past kind of Novritsch's QC, especially in that thumb grip there. There's a lot of edges to it. And actually that's something Dom, the owner of this rifle, said, is that he's noticed that the join is a bit rough. So yeah, that's kind of a letdown there, Novritsch. I mean, Cymer's managed to do it. Why can't you? Last thing to do is fully assemble both rifles and see how they look assembled. Both of them use 3 attachment points. 2 of them are retained, and on the Novritsch rifle we have to fit the third. Unlike the Cymer, all 3 attachment points are retained. So on the barrel we have this little lug, and it just goes into this key slot here. In it goes. So with this lug installed, we can now drop the receiver into the body. Our bipod attachment threads in. Right, so with the lug installed, we can then take our assembly Allen key and screw in the other 2 bolts. One here just behind the magwell, and one here just behind the trigger. And hey presto, we have one assembled Novritsch rifle. So what are my initial thoughts on the SSG96? Well, overall it's pretty good, though I do have some niggles with it. The biggest one by far is the body joint on it. For the price you pay for this rifle, I am surprised that Novritsch could not get this to match up. I mean, the Cymer, which is a half, it's not a third the cost, can do that. Why can't Novritsch do that? And the other thing that kind of annoys me is that the cheek rest riser screws need an Allen key to adjust them. I mean, that's not a deal breaker, it's just a bit weird when everything else has thumb bolts. It is nice that they include the Allen key for adjusting the hop and hide it in the stock so you can take it out with you when you play. But I am a bit annoyed that they call this a top dead center hop when it's not actually top dead center, it's just a top adjust hop that pushes on the arm, not directly above the nub. Internals wise, they're actually pretty good. I mean, you've got metal piston, metal spring guide, you have steel sears in it. The hop-up chamber looks pretty good. They've put a custom flat nub arm on it, and they've paired that with a maple leaf hop-up rubber, though it's still Type 96 barrel and it's still a brass Type 96 barrel, so there could be some improvements there. But then again, if they upgraded every single part, the cost would probably be a lot more. Personally, I quite like the magazine design with the kind of smoked clear idea, so you can actually see your BBs. Although, then again, I don't particularly mind the metal ones of the Cyma. I guess the smoke clear ones means that you don't actually need that black on black empty mag indicator. You can just look at your mag. They're so close to making it really, really nice, and there are just a couple of little niggles. Also, the receiver is quite sharply cut. There's no chamfers on it, so it feels quite harsh to the touch. Not that you're going to be touching the receiver all that much, but it's just one of those things to bear in mind. Like, sure, it's an extra machining step, but adding a little chamfer will just add to the kind of quality of it. And the other niggle is the fact that some of the offside bolts are Allen key heads as opposed to the threads that they should be. I'm fairly sure on the real ones it's all Allen keys from one side going into threaded inserts on the other. And they've put the Allen keys on both sides just where the receiver parts are thin and they can't put a bolt all the way through. But I mean, Cyma have done it and just mounted them from the inside. It's just little things that they could do just slightly better that they haven't done. But looking at this is only half the story. We actually need to take it out to the range and see how it performs, which I'm doing tomorrow, but it will be another video. So if you want to see that and see how the Novritsch rifle stacks up against the current build state of the DIY SSG, then make sure you're subscribed and make sure you've hit that notification bell so that you'll be notified as soon as the video goes live. That's enough shilling from me. I hope you've all enjoyed this video and this deep dive into the SSG. As you can see, it's pretty good, but there are still some issues I have with it. But anyway, that's enough for now. Stay safe, and I'll see you all soon.